A very dangerous storm system is about to impact the United States, and this is going to cause a bunch of different problems, including a significant risk of severe weather, which includes widespread damaging winds, large to very large hail, and as well as strong tornadoes being possible. In addition to that, we are expecting a lot of snow in areas like the northern plains and the upper Midwest. The potential for major flooding exists in the Mississippi River Valley later this week, and there will also be much colder weather over the next 7 days. So in today's forecast, we are going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 days. And we'll begin with what's happening across the country right now. And for the most part, things are starting to quiet down compared to yesterday. We just had a large-scale severe weather event exit off the East Coast. We actually ended up having a few tornado warnings back over New Jersey and even back over in Maryland last night. But overall, all that shower and thunderstorm activity is now moving offshore. And our next big storm system is now forming back over in the Central Plains and along the West Coast. We'll have one storm over the next few days that brings the threat for significant severe weather, and yet again another storm system will form back over in Texas as we go into the weekend, and that will cause even more problems. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with what's happening today. We have an enhanced risk of severe weather in place in southeastern Kansas and central and northern Oklahoma. That does include the Oklahoma City metro. A slight risk of severe weather from southern Iowa into north Texas, right around Dallas-Fort Worth, and also into Kansas City, and the marginal risk of severe weather going from Chicago and central Nebraska back into West Texas. So some of our main concerns for today include damaging winds. There will be some scattered damaging winds with the storms that we see late this afternoon into the evening across Missouri, Kansas, and also back into the southern plains. But one of the biggest concerns is very large hail. There will be many storms, I think, that produce some significant hail, and that means that we could see some hailstones as high as the size of apples, mainly in the hatched area, which includes Oklahoma City, just outside Dallas-Fort Worth near Wichita Falls, Texas, and also impacting areas like southeast Kansas near Wichita, Kansas, where we could have some very large hail. There's also a threat for a little bit of large hail outside of this region. It'll be more isolated, and it'll only really be up to about golf ball sized hail unless you're in that hatched region, but still protect your vehicles as a good precaution in case you do see severe weather. Our tornado risk has continued to increase just a little bit. We do have a 10% hatched region right now just around in north of Oklahoma City and also in southeast Kansas. That means that a strong tornado or two are possible this evening. We will likely be live on this channel covering this as long as this threat does end up materializing, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. There's also a chance for an isolated tornado or two outside of this region, so just be aware of that. Have a tornado action plan ready to go in multiple ways to receive warnings. The majority of this threat will be this evening and maybe into the early overnight hours in a few select locations. I also want to throw it out there is a low-end tornado risk just east of San Francisco today. It's a very low chance, but we might see a brief tornado out there, so something else to watch for if you're watching from California. Now, in terms of our severe weather risk on Wednesday, this is again potentially going to be a tornado outbreak stretching from the Great Lakes in the Ohio Valley back into the Mississippi River Valley. Right now, we have a large enhanced risk of severe weather in place from Michigan back into northern Louisiana. Slight risk back over into Dallas-Fort Worth and also into central Michigan. And honestly, this storm system looks very similar to what we just saw on Sunday when it comes to the risk area, but the setup is very different, and it's honestly a more intense and powerful storm system that could cause the potential for a tornado outbreak. There's a lot of wind shear in place, a lot of instability. It looks like Wednesday is going to be a very long day. So our main concerns for tomorrow's severe weather event include numerous to widespread damaging winds, and at times this could be significant, meaning we could have damaging winds as high as 80 to 90 miles per hour, anywhere from the Great Lakes back into the lower Mississippi River Valley. Damaging winds also possible back down into Texas. Large to very large hail will be a big concern, especially out of those initial supercells that develop. We are expecting a lot of storms right in this little corridor here in northeast Arkansas near Little Rock, also back through Jonesboro and into southern Illinois. And I think this is where we could really be talking about not just a lot of hail, but also the potential for some strong tornadoes. This is right now what it looks like for the outline of strong tornadoes on Wednesday. And the general risk area is from southwest Ohio and southern Indiana back into most of eastern Arkansas and also into northern Louisiana, where a few strong and long track tornadoes are going to be a possibility. Keep in mind, though, if you're not in this area, you can still see tornadoes, and in some cases, we have seen strong tornadoes outside of the hatched area before, so don't be caught off guard. If you're anywhere back up even into central Michigan, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, we could actually still see a couple of tornadoes in those areas, and in some cases, especially with the environment that we have tomorrow, a strong tornado cannot be ruled out due to how strong the wind shear is going to be. And this will be a prolonged severe weather event. We are expecting severe weather to continue even into Thursday and Friday. Friday. We have elongated slight risk of severe weather from northeast Texas back into West Virginia. I wouldn't be surprised in a future outlook if we end up getting an enhanced risk of severe weather somewhere in this region, as it's still a very favorable environment for tornadoes even on Thursday. The problem will be all the storms that are preceding this event on Wednesday and even Thursday morning. That could stabilize the atmosphere some, which could actually limit the tornado risk, which would be very good news if that does happen. And then also, as we go into Friday, another slight risk of severe weather is in place in Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Texas, and as well as Arkansas. So get ready. It's going to be a very busy next several days. It is going to be a very long time frame. We're probably going to be live almost every single day here over the next 5 to 6 days, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Now let's go day by day, beginning with what's happening tonight in terms of our severe weather risk. We have a very favorable environment today for tornadoes across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. The one big limiting factor right now is that there will be a cap in place, which means there's a temperature inversion aloft that can prevent storms from forming. So as long as that stays in place, there should not be very many storms. However, computer models have been continuing to show an increase of activity just around or after sunset tonight back over in central Oklahoma and as well as Kansas, where a discrete supercell or two are possible, and if one does form, a long-tracked and or strong tornado are definitely in play. But today's environment, again, very favorable. These tornado parameter values are basically maxing out here across Oklahoma and Kansas, indicating a lot of wind shear, instability, and as well as moisture. This is definitely a day that you want to stay weather aware on, even though that the threat is a bit more conditional. It is still a threat that could, if we get a storm, could easily materialize and produce strong and long-track tornadoes. So it's a good idea to have multiple ways to receive alerts and a tornado action plan ready to go. After midnight, a cold front will be moving through where we will have a few elevated storms that'll fire off along that cold frontal boundary, but most of those are not really going to be that severe when it comes to tornadoes. It would be more of a large hail and wind risk since those will be more elevated, but still a low-end tornado risk after midnight, so make sure you have multiple ways to receive warnings. But again, the strong tornado risk would be much lower out of that particular setup. Now let's talk more about the timing for severe weather today. Beginning with late this afternoon, there will be a few pop-up showers and storms in Nebraska. These ones are going to be pretty elevated, mainly hailstorms by around 4, 5, 6 o'clock. And then by around 6 to 7 o'clock, storm initiation is expected in Kansas and as well as Oklahoma, where a couple of discrete supercells are going to be possible. And this is the environment where strong and long-track tornadoes are a possibility. It's, again, a conditional risk. It's not a guarantee that we are going to see it, but if storms fire, it's a pretty good chance that we're going to see something like that. Now, this is the latest HRRR model run, and it indicates actually 2 different discrete supercells forming, which would definitely not be a good thing. If we had 2 different ones that are going on, these could both be tornadic easily, one of which is back over just northeast Oklahoma City moving in the direction of Tulsa, and the other supercell in far northern Oklahoma moving into southeastern Kansas. Keep in mind, though, that the storm position here is very approximated. It may be further north, might be further south, and we also might only see 1 storm, no storms, or 3 storms. You never know. This is, again, a really conditional risk. It's going to really depend on if the cap is overcome in these areas. The HRRR also tries to shoot off a couple of storms back over in southern Oklahoma and north Texas, a trend to definitely watch for as we go throughout the rest of today. If storm confidence does increase here, and we actually have more confidence that these storms will fire, I wouldn't be surprised if our hatched area for tornadoes grows, and there's even a chance that we would get a moderate risk of severe weather if the confidence grew here. But again, it's a low chance of that happening. It's going to really depend on confidence of these supercells developing. Eventually, right around 9 to 10 o'clock, these storms are continuing to move into southeast Kansas and far northeastern Oklahoma. They would eventually fizzle out as they move into Missouri, but there's still enough energy for these to produce some hail, wind, and maybe an isolated tornado. And then we'll also have elevated storms beginning to fire up over in southeast Nebraska and northeast Kansas, where damaging winds, hail, and maybe a couple of tornadoes will be possible in a line of thunderstorms. So just after midnight, this will be approaching Kansas City, and into the overnight hours into early Wednesday morning, this will move across Missouri with mainly a wind risk and then maybe a little bit of large hail. And then eventually, as we go into late Wednesday morning, those showers and storms will be approaching areas like St. Louis and also across parts of Arkansas. And then going into Wednesday, our tornado risk looks a lot more elevated and a lot more certain that we are at least going to see a few tornadoes. This is what it looks like by lunchtime on Wednesday. Our tornado parameter values across the board are already increasing. We have a very large warm sector that's going to be in place, in addition to a lot of wind shear throughout almost all of Wednesday. So if we get any sort of storms out there, it's going to be pretty easy for these to produce tornadoes. We just need something to really grow in size and actually have discrete or even semi-discrete supercells tomorrow. This is by 3 to 4 o'clock, and notice how the values are really starting to skyrocket here across the Mississippi River Valley and northeast Arkansas, and also back into southern Indiana. So again, any discrete cells in this region could easily produce a strong tornado. So we need to watch this very closely tomorrow afternoon and evening. The values even get higher after sunset across western Tennessee, western Kentucky, southern Indiana and southeastern Illinois, and this should continue as we go even into the early overnight hours across parts of Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And then after 2 a.m., I think the tornado risk is very low to near zero in these areas. Now let's talk more about the timing for Wednesday, beginning with what's happening during Wednesday morning. We'll have a weakening line of thunderstorms moving into Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas. This is actually going to throw a little bit of a curveball into our forecast for tomorrow, because any sort of showers and thunderstorms that are out there during the mid to late morning and early afternoon will actually stabilize the atmosphere some, which should limit the severe weather risk to some extent from northeast Texas all the way back up towards Chicago. So that's good news. If this actually happens, it would really lead to more of an isolated wind and hail risk rather than a strong and long track tornado threat. So that would limit that a little bit. And then by around 2 to 3 o'clock, we'll have some showers and thunderstorms rolling through St. Louis and as well as Little Rock. Eventually by 4 to 5 o'clock is when I think the environment really becomes primed for tornadoes. And notice right over here in northeast Arkansas, it is very messy, but there will be some supercells and semi-discrete supercells in here that are going to be producing the potential for tornadoes. I know it looks really messy and it does not look like it should be producing tornadoes, but in this type of environment where we have a lot of wind shear, it's not going to take much for a tornado to happen. So this is an area that we need to watch very closely during the mid to late afternoon hours. And there will also be a couple of prefrontal storms that form that'll also produce the potential for tornadoes if they're able to mature, which it looks like we should at least have a few of those across northern Tennessee, Kentucky, and also back into southwest Ohio and southern Indiana. This is by around 7 o'clock. Storms continue here across northeast Arkansas and right along the Mississippi River Valley, with tornadoes continuing to be a possibility and even some large hailstorms behind it as well. And even by around 9 to 10 o'clock, these storms are still producing the potential for large hail damaging winds and tornadoes. All these little ovals are basically rotation tracks that we have in all these different storms, and almost all of these storms are still going to be rotating even by around 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Eventually by 11 to 12, these storms are continuing here across Kentucky and Tennessee, still producing the potential for isolated tornadoes, damaging winds, and hail. We'll also have probably a line of storms trying to form back over in Indiana and Ohio. That could also produce some damaging winds and a couple of tornadoes even around and just after midnight. So get ready for a very long day ahead on Wednesday. This is going to be a pretty significant severe weather outbreak, I think, with strong and long track tornadoes being in play. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, as we'll be live on Wednesday, and we're also going to be probably live tonight and Thursday covering severe weather. In addition to that, make sure to click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. And I know we've talked a lot about severe weather, but that's not the only thing this storm is going to bring, because we have a potential for a winter storm in the northern plains in the Midwest. We'll also have high winds out in front of these storms as well, so strong gusty winds are likely due to the pressure gradient being pretty sharp here. Our low pressure system will get down to around 985 millibars at its peak, which is a pretty strong low pressure system, not nearly as strong as what we had in the middle of March with that tornado outbreak on March 14th and 15th, but that is not really relevant when it comes to our severe weather setup. We could definitely still see a significant tornado outbreak depending on the evolution of our storms tomorrow. But eventually, as we go into late Wednesday and into Thursday, notice how that storm system moves into Canada. We are still going to be continuing with heavy rainfall that will lead to some flooding back along the Mississippi River Valley and also into the Tennessee River Valley, where there will be a potential for some flooding due to all the rain that we are going to see over multiple different days. This all begins tomorrow and will run all the way through Sunday. Eventually by Friday, showers and storms continue here in Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, with more severe weather possible. And then by Saturday, a more organized trough will come out of Mexico and Texas. This will form and produce the potential for more severe weather, heavy rainfall that could also lead to flooding on Saturday. And that could actually lead to a little bit of late season snowfall back over in the Texas Panhandle and western Oklahoma on Saturday. By early Sunday, showers and storms continue to move across the Ohio Valley and the southeast. Severe weather should be a lower risk by Sunday, and then eventually by Monday and Tuesday of next week, we have a lot quieter of a weather pattern coming up. So there's at least something to look forward to here in the near future. But for the next 5 to 7 days, you definitely want to make sure that you're staying weather aware. We got a lot of severe weather, flooding, snow, and a lot more coming up across much of the United States. And our flooding risk continues to increase across the Mississippi River Valley from southern Indiana back into central Arkansas. We have a moderate risk of excessive rainfall for Wednesday, and Thursday, the risk is pretty much in the same area. So we are going to see a lot of rain over the next several days. The good news is that this is spread out over the span of about 6 days or so, but even then, it is going to stack up very quickly in some spots, and we could actually end up by the end of this weekend, as well as the end of the weekend, some spots could have as much as 15 to 18 inches of rainfall on the ground, and that could actually be in a scattered area. That's not necessarily just going to be in a singular location. That could be across several different towns and cities, so we definitely need to watch this situation very closely. And this is the amount of rainfall that we could be talking about between now and and Sunday morning. Look at this. Back over in a large area from central and northern Arkansas into southern Indiana, we could have a widespread 8 to 12 inches of rainfall, which is just absurd. I do think, though, that these numbers will actually end up being higher in some areas, which is hard to say. Areas like northeast Arkansas, I think, will have a widespread 10 to 15 inches of rainfall, and some localized locations could be well over 20 inches of rainfall by the end of this week. We are talking about the potential for a major, potentially even catastrophic flooding event in some locations if a lot of rain falls in a short period of time with already saturated grounds. Any area, though, here from even northeast Ohio back into North Texas could be talking about at least 2 to 4 inches of rainfall by the end of the weekend. So if you're in a low-lying area, you might want to consider going somewhere else here for the next several days, as we are expecting a lot of rainfall. Additionally, if you are traveling, definitely make sure you avoid flooded roadways, as there will probably be a lot of those here over the next few days with all the rain that we are expecting. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We'll likely be live later this evening covering severe weather, so make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. We will be live tomorrow, and we might even be live on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so pretty much every day we might be live, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. It'll be a very busy stretch of weather here over the next 7 days, probably the busiest stretch of severe weather that we've seen here in about a year, so definitely a very active stretch of weather is ahead. Just a heads up, our Supercell collection is now out at shopmaxvelocity.net. We have t-shirts, hoodies, and a lot more available. If you want to check this out, it's the top link in the description below or at shopmaxvelocity.net.